discussing romance as critical and empowered readers and authors. Our speaker for this panel is Ms. Mina Esguerra, who writes contemporary romance novels. When not writing romance, she is president of communications firm Bronze Age Media, development communication consultant, indie publisher, and professional editor. She created a workshop series, Author at Once, for writers and publishers, and hashtag romance class for aspiring romance writers. Her contemporary romance novellas won the Filipino Reader's Choice Award for Chick Lit in 2012. And 2013. So let me now pass on the mic to our speaker.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. So I want to check lang if you're in the right panel. If you're in the right session, did you all intend to attend? Our Kilig is valid? Yes? This is a subtle reminder that if this is not what you signed up for, you can change your mind. Okay. So if you're staying, then we're doing this. Okay. Thank you for choosing to attend this session today. My name is Mina V. Esguerra, and I'm an author and publisher of romance novels. The theme of this year's Philippine International Literary Festival has centered on memory. And this topic I'm presenting has a complicated relationship with not only literature, but in being remembered. I have been writing and publishing romance in English for 10 years and have been in over a dozen panels representing the books that I write, my career, my genre. Most of the time, I am up here explaining what is romance. Why do I write it? Do you know how popular it is? Why is it worth reading? It's the year 2019, and I have to do this again. But I always try to mention how we've progressed, because we have wonderfully. And if you heard me speak on this even just 5 years ago, you will see that we have come so far right now. Still, maybe I should also accept that I will always need to deliver a romance 101. Maybe memory involves people taking the role of repeating the thing over and over until enough people know about it. I hope that in the spirit of the theme of this festival of memory, those here remember the value of examining how we write relationships, which is what I'm essentially going to be talking about. Let's not ask anymore if romance as a genre is valid. It is. Let's ask it to be better. Let's ask all our genres to be better. I have written and published 24 books, mainly contemporary romance, and I am currently writing my 25th. I have a bachelor's degree in communication and a master's degree in development communication. Before publishing my first book, I spent 10 years working in editorial and publishing, and by the time I founded hashtag romance class, the online community, my work had included 7 years of building, administering, and maintaining international online communities for policy, practice, and development. I introduced my session this way because, based on the photos you will see later, it will look like it's all fun and games, what we do. It is fun, and there are games, but it's also a lot of work and a lot of actual data and professional practice behind it. Okay, when I say romance novels, I go by the definition that romance must contain a romance plot as its main plot and a happy ending for the characters in the relationship, which is what emotional justice means. This is the definition we got from the Romance Writers of America Association, from the World Community of Romance Readers that calls itself Romancelandia, and this is what many publishers use as well. If the novel does not have a main romance plot or a happy ending for its main characters. It is a love story, a tragedy, general fiction, drama, fiction with romance elements, not romance. While according to certain surveys, as much as 85% of romance readers identify as women, it is not the same as women's fiction, because romance can and should be inclusive of all. I have needed to explain that romance is not women's fiction when I'm asked about it by high school students, college students, MA students, literature teachers, and publishing professionals. As far as misconceptions go, this is systemic and manages to keep so many people actually involved in literature uninformed about important books just because they happen to be romance. Raise your hand if you read romance books as I've defined it. Keep your hand up if you've read more than one this year. Keep your hand up if you regularly read romance that are not by American, Western, or white authors. Thank you, you can. I've read 50 books in 2019 so far, mostly romance or fiction with romance elements, most of them by non-white authors. And I know people who have read 100 by now. This is a billion-dollar industry with a very active and enthusiastic world readership. I don't mean to make anyone feel bad about their reading speed or genre choices. But I like to know when I'm speaking to a crowd how much of a background you'll need and if you'll recognize names that I'll be mentioning as I go on. So why am I here and why am I talking about something called #romance class? It was literally a romance class that I offered for free in 2013. It attracted 100 joiners, about 50 active participants, and at the end of 6 months, 14 completed manuscripts. 11 books were published from that first batch. Since then, the community has gone on to help over 80 Filipino authors publish over 100 books. We hold events every year, the last one in April 2019, so that readers can discover the books. Our books are read in many places, some unexpected. They're read beyond the locations of the authors, meaning not just our family and friends, thank God, and are now in ebook reading devices, bookstores, classrooms, and libraries. This map is a survey that I conducted on Twitter, asking people where they are, if they've read a book written by someone in the romance class community. It's amazing. I didn't add a zoom in of the Philippines, but it's on my Twitter, but you can see it there. I zoom in on the map of the Philippines, and it's of course not the entire country, but a lot of places in the country. Happy about that. Since 2016, we've refocused the classes and the community to help authors who wish to write romance in English but with Filipino or Asian characters. These are recent books. So these are like published within the past 2 years. We're doing this despite reminders year on year that US publishing has become increasingly white, despite calls for more diversity. This annual survey by bookseller The Ripped Bodice revealed essentially who's trying to do something about it and who isn't. So the pink books are the non-white authors. That's the most recent survey. But that's just one side. because we see support in retailer orders, library orders, blogger coverage, booktube, bookstagram, media mentions, Twitter, Goodreads, actual readers. So, what we've learned so far from being present in all of these conversations with all of these readers all over the world, writing what we do and writing this genre, we have discovered that our kilig is valid. Often when I'm interviewed, I'm asked why I write romance. Writing about romance and love and sex is not by itself strange. I don't know though, but I don't know if you know that almost every romance author I've met was told not to write romance early on as a young author. Well-meaning mentors have told me that to be taken seriously, I should write something else. For a few years, I did that. I told you about romance class and our 80 published authors. So many of them have the same story. But we ended up here. Some of the authors are here in this room at that table. We're here because our kilig is valid. Romance happens to be a genre where it is expected and really it is a requirement to explore what makes a relationship function. Under what circumstances can love begin? What challenges can it overcome? How does one learn to be in a relationship? And sometimes sadly and importantly, what does love look like? What does pleasure look like? What does the feeling of being trusted and loved as you deserve look like? Books are mirrors and windows, and it makes my skin crawl whenever someone who writes or loves reading says that romance is typical boy meets girl, which means my skin crawls on a weekly basis and intensifies as Valentine's Day approaches. We can believe that the books we like, that the books we make, can be both a mirror to someone and a window to someone else. Romance as a genre in the world is releasing books that are not typical boy meets girl. What is typical even? There are books that feature characters who are just like us, no matter who we are. Have we found our mirrors? I'm assuming that some of you have interest in the romance genre and that's why you're here, maybe. If you're attending this literary festival and chose this session, can you think of at least 5 romance books that you feel are wonderful mirrors to yourself? If you struggle to fill a list, then we haven't done enough. We need to read more and encourage more to write. Okay. So this is the section about what we've learned from empowered readers and authors. After 6 or so years of being in community with readers in the Philippines and other countries, we have an entire list of things we know we should do. I'm aware that the audience in this room will likely be readers, authors, educators. So I've narrowed this list to what could be relevant to us here. Short version, be critical, empower, and don't empower the jerks. Being critical means we can recognize that our kilig is valid and make it mean something more by looking at why we feel things. Why does this romance work or not work? If it works, does it empower or harm? Can a little book with a pink cover really empower or harm? It doesn't hurt to ask a few questions, such as, in the case of romances with male love interests, is he a romance hero or actually just a decent human being? Let's question how we elevate to romantic the actions that should be bare minimum decent. The bar is so low, especially now. And when men and even women tell me that our depiction of a romance hero is unrealistic because no man is that good, I just want to tell them, as I'm telling you now, they should be that good. A romance hero should not merely be the least abusive man among many abusive men. It is important to me to normalize that demanding that men be better demand that men be better rather than demand that a romance author be more realistic. If a book takes the side of empowering jerks, then definitely question it. As a reader, how do we feel about this? As an author, why do I like writing this? As an educator, how do we evaluate and discuss this work? Next question. Is she truly in love? Or did she have no other choice? In too many forms of Philippine media and literature, women are plot devices. They're hurt or killed to call a man into action. When a woman is the main character, the most common dramatic device is to make her suffer and sacrifice her happiness for a man, for a parent, a child, ignoring what we know is true in social development, which is when you empower women, when you focus on their mental health, and give them choices, you lift up entire communities. When the romance story documents a woman's suffering and then requires the woman to sacrifice everything, we should ask who benefits from the sacrifice. Who in the story does not suffer because we made the woman suffer? Did we just empower a jerk? So in romance class, the community, we require this. Give your main characters agency, and that includes the power to say that they want this person. Consent is a requirement. Some authors I've met have found this difficult to even imagine, a consent-filled relationship. But if you write with our community, this is a requirement because this is the stand that we've taken. Clearly, this isn't the case in many books out there that we'll get to read, and of course, people do go ahead and write what they want anyway. Even after we've told them, focus on consent, focus on empowerment, please. They will do what they want. As readers, though, we can be critical and question their work. How do we feel about this? Why did you want to write this? And as an educator, how do we discuss this book existing in the world and possibly being popular? I've kept mentioning woman in this section, but we actually have similar requirements for queer characters. When the authors in the community write them, give them agency, show us what happens when they have choices. Next question. Is it funny or is it actually hurtful, but pointing it out just leads to abuse because the not funny person has the power? Is it realistic or is it selectively realistic in ways that empower and enable the jerks in our society? Harmful jokes, harmful stereotypes, and cruelty, yes, sadly, these exist in real life. But you know how it is with jokes. Some people just aren't funny. But they think they are. One can be dangerous all the same. Philippine romance media, but really so much romance media in the world, perpetuate harmful things because historically, those who didn't find it funny had no voice in the writing and publishing process. We can and should listen to them. Authors must take the time to consider this feedback and educate ourselves on what we've been responsible for perpetuating. Educators are in a unique position to discuss this with students who are learning to be critical about the media that they consume. On this aspect, we have learned so much from young people, much more actually than those we considered our mentors. If we are supposed to be doing this for readers, then we should be listening to them. On those 3 points alone, and there are still many, we already know we have a lot of work to do as authors in the Philippines writing Filipino characters. And new voices are often the answer to this. If romance is what you do want to write, but you've never felt completely represented in it, there are ways to be critical so that future books will be better and empower those who are learning how to write romance. Our Kilig is valid, and we wouldn't have been able to do this if we gave up when people told us to. I'm even prouder of the work being done now because of how readers have a voice in the process. So, one of the best ways to get new readers to experience what I'm talking about is through live readings. Raise your hand if you've actually read a book by me or a romance class. Hi. So that's great. So most people here haven't. So this is a way that you can get to experience it firsthand and four at the same time. Actors Gio Gahol and Rachel Coates were our very first live readers. We've been doing this for about 3 years now. And they're still 4. So, and they still perform live readings at our events. We've learned that this is an important part of the process too. It's one thing to write your kilig and read it, but hearing it and seeing it. So here's a sample of what that's like. They're going to be reading from 4 books. Trying to figure out how to introduce it. The first book is by me. And what you should know about this book is the characters are both 30-something. So it's supposed to be like the time when you should be married by now. And they discuss it. So, Gio and Rachel?
Check. Hello.
Hi, everyone.
What is it? Afternoon, good evening, I'm not sure. Good afternoon, I guess. Okay, so.
This is Better at Weddings Than You.
By Mina V. Esguerra. This resort was fancy, wasn't it? Aaron felt dull, lazy, and spoiled. He was walking barefoot on powdery sand holding a bottle of German beer, listening to the breaking of the waves on the shore. What day was it? It felt like Christmas. He felt rich. He felt like champion of something. He never went to places like this, even as his savings and income grew. Seemed like a waste to spend so much for luxury. The cost-saving mindset might have been the thing that got him promoted several times. His last 3 years at that job, supervising back-to-back product launches and sales conferences, blurred together into one really long, tiring thing. Lisa's wedding had been a nice change of pace, lower expectations of him, and it wasn't about making money or hitting targets. Did Daphne think about her work this way? Like it was a break from more stressful things? He was probably being the amateur looking at the thing with rose-colored glasses, selling happy ever afters that didn't exist. She didn't even want to be in a relationship. Did dealing with these couples for years tell her something he didn't know? Where's Daphne? He thought right then. She said she was going back into the dining hall to get the same kind of beer. He turned that way and saw her through the framed entryway, already holding the bottle, already drinking from it. Her return to him out on the beach was being delayed by the blonde dude talking to her. Obviously, hitting on her. Obviously. Aaron remembered the guy from dinner, several tables from them. Guy at the corner table by himself. He was behind them when they had their salmon grilled, made a comment about the food, and Aaron picked up a European accent. He just wasn't sure from where exactly. The impulse to grip the bottle tight came to him, and he let himself do it. Daphne was talking to a virtual stranger, and she was smiling. No dagger eyes and sharp tone from when they first met. Imagine how easy it was going to be to like the smile, the voice, the words, without the effort of turning them around from hostile. This guy got the smiling, flirty Daphne right away, and he didn't know how lucky he was. He was gonna want her. Daphne could do whatever she wanted with that. It wasn't like she was in a relationship or anything. When she came back, she was smiling still. By then, Aaron's thoughts would have gone 3 times around the island when strung together. why don't you want to be in a relationship? He blurted that out without an intro. I'm curious. I mean, you could be married with kids by now if you wanted to, but you're not. Daphne looked at him, but turned to the water when she answered.
Do you think I'm just saying that? Like I'm reverse psychologizing the universe?
Oh, if you wanted to, you could have anyone,
This is so fascinating.
she said.
I mean, this conversation, I keep wanting to have this conversation with someone, and it figures I'll be having it with a man.
Which means what?
Oh, no, it's not that I don't want it. But for the past few years, I just came to accept that, well, I don't need it. This makes sense to you, doesn't it? You're a guy. This is what you know.
Not necessarily, he said. I grew up being told that the only way my life will get any sense of order is when a woman puts it in order.
Oh, like your mother, your sister. Families do that for each other anyway. You're expected to let them do that. And they also tell you to go out and see a bunch of women to satisfy your other needs.
He couldn't argue with that.
Well,
She continued.
I have to find a guy who'll provide money and sex and conversation. And I can't break those up and find them in different people. I have to keep auditioning one guy who'll give me all of that.
Aaron paused to thank the universe that his dad, mom, and older sisters let him get to this age without meddling. His older sisters got married in their 30s, but he never heard dinner table conversations about setting deadlines for them. But you can, break that up and have those with different people if you wanted to.
Well, yeah, I'm doing that now. Girl's got to do what she can. The money I have to make myself, though I can't wait for that. But you do get what I'm trying to say, right? I was expected to find some smart, rich, decent sex god. And if I don't, I'm expected to be happy with 1 or 2 out of the 4.
I'm not rich.
Cute. That's probably why you never got referred to me by any of my well-meaning friends.
It's probably because I'm not decent. Her moonlit side eye against the backdrop of the night and sea was right out of a teenage daydream.
Seriously, Aaron? For years, I was expected to go to dinner and meet this one guy whose life I was expected to stabilize and at the same time satisfy his needs forever and ever. It doesn't sound fun at all.
No, it does not.
So, guess what I did?
You gave it up. She lifted a finger like he had scored a point.
No, it's not revolutionary. You're already there. Just welcome me to your club.
It's not a club.
Well, it's something. I wish I could tell people about it because choosing not to give a crap made my life so much easier. Imagine all of the good people not wanting me to end up alone, setting me up with guy after guy who they think is gonna take care of me. But I take one look at them and I know who's gonna be needing the caring. Does that help me? It's like they're worried I'll end up like my mom who never married my dad, never got to do her own ceremony and cut the cake, but doesn't have an anniversary to celebrate. But Aaron, here's what I realized. My mom is not alone. She has great friends and she has hobbies and passions and she goes on dates too and she has me. That is a way better life. Well, I think, than being tied down to the deadbeat who gave the sperm to make me.
You watch weddings all the time, he said. What do you think about all of it? I mean, do you think they're just kidding themselves?
Some of them are. The others, I don't think they're kidding themselves. They really want this. And, well, you have to want it, I think, because that's the only way that it can work for that long. You guys know this. You would know because you don't do relationships. You don't do it because you don't need it. And you've never wanted it badly enough yet.
Daphne clinked her beer bottle to his.
Same. What's in this beer? I'm a philosopher all of a sudden. Better at weddings than you?
By Mina V. Esguerra.
Thank you. So, we're doing a giveaway during the live readings. If you want a copy of the book that they just read, go to Lee/gotta do what she can. There are limited copies for giveaway, so just input your email address.
What a deal. Love it.
So for the next book, what you need to know is usually when we do live readings, we have the main couple because we require happy endings, right? So we feature a reading with the main couple who will be together at the end. That's the rule, emotional justice. But for today, because I wanted to illustrate a certain scene, we're going to have a conversation between exes. So they don't, FYI, they don't end up together. These two particular characters.
This is No Two Ways.
By Chi Rodriguez. It was right here.
It's right there. Axel was broader now, sturdier. He traded his plain shirts and tattered jeans for suits, and his Onetsuka sneakers for wing-tipped Italian leather. But more notably, you have silver hair. I couldn't even stand up to greet him. He was a bit too much to take at the moment.
It was purple a month ago.
He laughed as he sat down.
You should have seen it.
Sorry, no, I just... You look so different. My brows were furrowed, but my lips slowly curved to return his smile. Hi! He dropped his head, presumably to hide his amusement, and I appreciated that.
Hi, and you.
He nodded in the general direction of me in my light-wash skinny jeans and my black V-neck.
You ditched your makeover look.
Yeah, well, I preferred the one with the pants, to be honest. I'm glad I at least got to take the clothes home.
Leather ones, right? Those did seem more you, the you I remember at least.
Axel wasn't really far off. I hadn't changed much. I knew myself more now and was more comfortable in my own skin. But I was still pretty much the same person. Him, on the other hand, you are nothing like I remember. He gestured for me to go ahead with my food.
I'm still the same, just a little less rough around the edges, I guess.
We both took bites of our food at the same time, and for a few moments, all that was exchanged were quick glances and baffled smiles. It was so weird being face to face with such a huge part of my past, especially since we were both consciously trying to leave it behind, everything that we've shared. The circumstances of our breakup were complicated. I hadn't fallen out of love with him back then, at least not completely. The realization that my attraction to girls was not just caused by the environment I grew up in had messed me up. I suddenly didn't know who I was, and I felt like I was lying to him, and I hadn't figured out yet at the time that I was bisexual. It's like I knew what being bisexual meant, but my mind couldn't comprehend it once directly confronted. And it was so easy for me to accept it from other people. I thought I was this progressive person, but seeing it for myself, feeling it for myself, having to accept that I had to live with these emotions, I suddenly didn't know how to process it. I was asking myself why I didn't feel gay or I didn't feel straight, and I kept wishing things were clear-cut and easy. The only thing I was sure of was that it wasn't fair for either of us, and I couldn't stay.
So, who's the doomed person who nominated you for the show?
I groaned as I let my head fall back. Someone from my team at work.
Seriously?
Yeah. It was nothing but a drunk 3 a.m. decision. I made too many of those, so how can I hold that against him? He laughed, the same melodious sound I remembered.
I kind of miss that.
Miss what?
Drunk 3 a.m. decisions.
I tilted my head and narrowed my eyes at him, which prompted him to continue.
I never get to make those anymore.
I found out that 3 years after we broke up, Axel had to give up his band to finally immerse himself in the family business. So, does your dad let you have funky hair at work?
Well, this was my final and ongoing rebellion. He gets to tell me what to do I get to keep the hair. I lose the hair freedom. He loses me.
I could only imagine how things went during client meetings, but this was definitely my type of anarchy.
Did the show ask you to lie?
Hmm?
In Hotter Than Hot, they said you were looking for a boyfriend.
Ah. Well, I guess it was as good a time as any to come out to my ex-boyfriend again. Yes and no.
What does that mean exactly?
Well, I flashed him my brightest smile as I stalled, chewing a big bite of mango crepe before continuing. Well, I do like girls, but I also like other people who are not girls. So technically, they only made me kind of lie. Axel's brows furrowed, but that hint of a smile on his face gave me that same little bit of comfort I needed to not want the ground to swallow me whole. I was never the most comfortable experience explaining my sexuality to other people, and Axel, having believed one thing all these years, didn't bode well.
So, you still like guys?
Yes, I do. He was looking at me, but he still managed to make me not feel scrutinized. It was like he was reading the blank spaces around me, assessing some tell I didn't know I had. Am I confusing you?
A little.
My laugh was awkward at best.
A little, yeah. I've never met someone like you.
Well, if you think you haven't met a single bisexual person in your life, you're wrong. It's highly likely that you just had no idea they were bi.
No tells, huh?
I smiled and shook my head. I mean, I could say that your hair is a tell. Or how do you carry yourself is a tell. I could be some random guy who would approach you at a bar just based off on how neatly you wear your clothes. Or that guy, I said, pointing at this big burly man by the window. I could say, his body is a tell. But you can't assume whether a person's straight or not just by how they act or present themselves. He cleared his throat.
Yeah, I guess you're right.
Oh, did I get too serious?
No, it's fine. If there's anyone I can trust to tell me when I'm being a jerk without attacking me, it's you.
Yep. There's the Axel I thought was already buried underneath all of his designer suits. He'd always been kind and understanding. I didn't even hold his disappearance after our breakup against him. I broke his heart. He was entitled to that. Axel, I just wanted to say, our breakup, it wasn't on you. I just didn't know how to handle my realizations yet at the time, but you were an amazing boyfriend. His gaze softened. I watched as his hand slid across the table, palm up, and waited for my hand to meet it. And when I obliged, he squeezed my hand and smiled.
I know.
That was No Two Ways.
By Chiyu Rodriguez.
So if you want a copy of that book, go to bit.ly Hotter Than Hot. Okay.
Lovely.
The next book. Okay, the thing that you have to understand about the next book is she is a med student going through depression. She, in a very vulnerable moment, she was saved by someone she thinks is a ghost. He's not a ghost. But she goes to the roof to talk to this person, and he keeps it up in makeup, in fog machine. And now she has somebody to talk to, but he's not a ghost. And the scene that they're about to read now is one of those rooftop conversations.
So, without further ado, this is Ghost of a Feeling.
By Celestine Trinidad.
It was a long time ago.
She said,
Well, in college. Not too long ago, but well, being in medicine, you feel like your life in college was a different lifetime altogether, you know? Anyway, this guy, because I loved him, I thought that I should give him everything. And I mean, everything.
She looked at him meaningfully at that, which gave him another fresh jolt of that weird, sharp pain.
Just to keep him. And I did, but maybe I didn't really love him after all, because when it ended, I didn't really feel sad or anything. Only relieved.
She sighed.
Well, I really don't know how you feel, because I hadn't felt that for a person before, but well, I do know how it feels like to be so sure of something, but then no longer be sure of it anymore. And it's really painful, I know. And then you start thinking about all the other things in your life that can also be taken away from you.
Their eyes met, and she held his gaze.
But you said that to me yourself.
She said,
And there's still a chance that it won't be taken away from you. And there's still a chance that you can find happiness again.
Nathan took a deep breath and nodded.
So let's remember happier times.
She said,
Let me go back to my question. Tell me, when was the last time you remember being happy?
He told her about the last beach trip with Andrea, modifying the details accordingly, and when he finished, he realized that the heaviness in his own heart had lifted. It was strange. He thought he was saving her, but maybe she was saving him too. What about you? Tell me about your last happiest memory. Chris's eyes became distant.
New Year's Eve,
She said.
a year ago.
Nathan nodded encouragingly. Well, what made you happy then?
Nothing, really.
Chris said.
I was just home, I guess. I stay here in Manila during the school year, and I come home for the weekends, but sometimes I don't even get to, because I have to study for the exams, and that happens all the time.
She closed her eyes.
It was very nice. Ma was grilling hot dogs in the yard, and Pa was setting up the fireworks, and Pa didn't really want to spend on the really big fireworks, so we only had a fountain and some trumpillo, but that was a yearly tradition. And I remember feeling really excited about the new year then, because that was the year I was finally going into junior internship, the final year in medical school. And suddenly we heard explosions, so we looked up and we saw the most beautiful thing.
Nathan watched her face closely as she spoke, marveling at the change in her as she told him her story. Her eyes seemed to sparkle with a light that seemed to shine from within. And her cheeks were flushed with excitement. He was suddenly very acutely aware of how her loose shirt draped from one shoulder, exposing her other shoulder. A few strands of her hair escaped from her ponytail, and he wanted to brush them back and entwine them around his fingers.
Up in the sky,
She said,
there were fireworks. You know, the kind that you see on TV? And we realized that it must have come from the big fireworks display from the bayan. And luckily, we could see it from the house, too. It was the most wonderful thing. And it was the first time it ever happened for us. And I remember thinking then that I could live like this forever. So full of hope and promise for the future, with things falling into place.
She opened her eyes.
That felt really good.
She said,
Remembering. It's not really what happened that made me happy. It was remembering the hope.
and it's this that we should hold on to, Nathan said. Not the hurt, not the sadness, but the hope. When you're at your lowest, remember that moment and hold on to hope. She smiled.
Yes. Thank you for helping me remember.
They said nothing more after that. They only stood smiling at each other. His eyes did not and could not leave her face. She's so beautiful, he thought. She closed her eyes again. Without thinking, he leaned forward. His face was inches away from hers when he felt the warmth of her breath on his skin. He breathed it in when he realized, she can hear me breathe. He jumped away, careful not to let out a breath that he had just taken in, and she wouldn't notice. He almost stumbled on the ground when he did so, and her eyes flew open.
Amelia, are you all right?
Fine, he stammered. Just, hey, it's almost sunrise.
Oh, you're right.
She said.
I better go to sleep. And you go wherever you go when it's daytime.
I will be here, he said. His heart had slowed finally. See you, Chris. And thank you. She smiled at him before she left. He felt a sharp, piercing pain in his chest suddenly, and he leaned on the boxes, a wry grin on his face. What the hell? He said to the rising sun.
Ghost of a Feeling?
By Celestine Trinidad.
So to get a free copy of Ghost of a Feeling, go to bit.ly. She can hear me breathe. I just checked the links na claim na yung giveaways for the 2 other books. Thank you. Enjoy. Enjoy.
You will enjoy, for sure.
So the last one, called Beginner's Guide. This book has been part of NPR's Best of 2017? 16? This has been part of NPR's Best of 2016. It's an indie published book by a Filipino author. What you need to know about this is she is a geeky marine science grad student. And he is a tattooed artist cafe owner. So it's opposites in a way. And here's our final reading.
Guys, gotta get ready for that link because you're gonna want this one. Beginner's Guide, Love and Other Chemical Reactions.
By Six de los Reyes.
Given the nature of our conversation, it was only logical that as we talked, our heads leaned close to each other. Nero rested his arm on the backrest of my seat, and I could feel the heat of his skin behind my neck. Repeated exposure to stimulus, in theory, habituates your brain so you no longer respond to it. It's a form of non-associative learning wherein cues are learned or ignored without any association to reward or punishment. It's simply ignoring that which does not affect you. But I must not have been exposed enough, because even after all of this time, looking at Nero's face still affected me. So, how do you go about initiating that? I asked.
Kissing is good. And a lot of touching.
Like how?
What?
I studied my breathing. Show me. Nero licked his lips. His eyes darted across the room, down the balcony, and into the first floor. Other than his 2-person crew and the 3 oblivious students tucked into their respective corners, the cafe was empty this Sunday. His fingers on my nape tickled the edge of my hair.
Are you sure?
I nodded.
I need you to say yes out loud.
Yes, I breathed. Out loud. I thought he was going to kiss me, but he tightened his fingers around my hair and he pressed his nose under my ear. His other hand was on my bare knee.
You are so weird.
Laughter might not have been appropriate in this context, but I couldn't help it. But the laugh was replaced by a gasp when the hand on my knee skimmed up my thigh and then his lips covered mine. I imagined that he kept a lab notebook of his own, as he had no difficulty replicating the results of last night's kiss. No one ever tells you what to do with your hands or your nose, but as it turned out, they move and find their place on their own accord. What I did next was a product of my baser instincts, overpowering higher thought, the result of a cocktail of neurotransmitters orchestrating a cascade of chemical reactions, setting my body on fire. It started with gravity. 2 bodies directly drawn to each other with a force directly proportional to how hard they fall and inversely proportional to the distance between them. And I couldn't get close enough. My hands were clutching his shirt, and his hands were everywhere, my hair, my neck, my rib cage, then on my hips. I put my arms around him, and he helped me off his seat and onto his lap. What follows are the laws of motion. First, a body at rest will remain at rest until a force acts upon it. Nero sat me astride him, and hands under my knees, he dragged me closer to his body. My head rolled backward, and he raked his teeth on my neck. The persistent ache between my legs escalated into a sweet torture, throbbing violently from inside my skin. He thrust himself against me, and I felt his response against my inner thigh. Second, acceleration. I pushed back against him, wanting to feel more of Nero on my skin. In principle, I understood the nature of the situation, and I understood the urge and the evolutionary need to fulfill that urge. What I couldn't seem to wrap my head around was the urgency taking over my better sense. Nero.
Yeah?
My belly tightened in response. What happens next? His fingers ghosted against the hem of my skirt and teased the skin underneath.
Are you sure?
Yes, I breathed. Yes. Out loud. Nero stood up, lifting me with him. My back hit the table, and if not for him holding me up against him with his thigh wrapped around my legs, I would have fallen into a mess on the ground. Ow,
Sorry.
he said in between kisses. My palms wandered down his chest, felt the ridges of his abs through my shirt, and I imagined lifting his shirt and touching his bare skin. Your shirt is in the way. He chuckled into my ear, and I felt it blaze a path down my spine. He cupped my jaw.
Slow down.
Walk me through. Instinctively, my legs wrap around his waist. Third, for every action, an equal and opposite reaction. I kissed him. He kissed me back, and the kisses were slow but hard and deep, hot. He pushed, I pushed back. I pulled, he pulled back. His hands were anchored on my hips. Between my legs, I was hot and slick.
What do you want?
He pulled my hips tighter against him. You, everything. He groaned.
Are you sure?
My face burned. Oh, I leaned back enough to put space between us. Oh, I didn't realize.
Realize what?
His fingertips carefully touched my face as he peered into my eyes.
What is it?
I gestured from me to him. Forward reaction, but I didn't consider the reverse reaction. That might have been inaccurate, but I was too overstimulated to think straight. He pressed his forehead against mine. My scalp tingled.
No problems with a reverse reaction. I'm just making sure you know what you're doing, because this is, as you say, an irreversible reaction. We can take it back.
I touched the tip of my nose against his. I'm sure. I want you to show me.
Trust me. I can show you a lot of things. Starting with this.
That was Beginner's Guide, Love and Other Chemical Reactions.
By Six de los Reyes.
They get interrupted in the book. They don't continue. Sorry if it's if it seems like you'll be getting a different book when you download your copy. bit.ly/yesoutloud to get a free copy of Beginner's Guide by $6 Reyes. Thank you, Gio and Rachel. So we have time for questions. Do you have any questions?
May mga questions po?
So the books are available at romanceclassbooks.com. So the way that we publish as a community is that we help each other indie publish the books. Although some are published by what we know as traditional or corporate publishers. But to see the over 100 books that the community has written and published so far, this is the website that has everything. They're available all over the world. Can be requested in print and ebook editions, can be requested in libraries. And actually, if you review books, you can just put in a request to review a book. We've given away about a dozen books today. So I hope those who pick them up appreciate it. We have events that are like this, but with a lot more screaming. The next event will be on October 5. So, any other questions? Okay.
Okay, thank you, Miss Mina, for that refreshing talk, and for actors Gio and
Thank you,
Rachel
Gio
for
and
your
Rachel.
performance in the event. So that ends the session on Kilig is Valid.